Okay, we're reconvening. AT are just getting themselves assembled online, and you can start putting your hand up if you've got questions of AT. You're welcome not to. Tamsin, would you like to sort of open this, and then have we got AT available? There's some AT available. Righto, Tamsin, just put the background up here. Oh, there he is, Mark Lane.
There's Mark. I'll hand over to Mark if there's any questions for the Auckland Transport team.
Well, the changes were a lot to do with in response to people's requests for a little bit more, and we've done those things. Mark Lang's there looking on and ready to answer any questions, and so is Stacey van der Putten. And oddly enough, no one seems to want to ask any questions. Oh no, the floodgates have opened. Councillor Hills.
Well, I was eating my lunch at the back, so I thought you were going to move on, but I will ask a question. Just for maybe Mark or Stacey, so it's not really about our side of the funding because we have increased it, and thank you for that, Mayor, for following up on our lobbying and the community's feedback. But with the GPS being so, I guess, will likely underfund public transport, walking and cycling from what we've put there, are these our best estimates, or could we be pitching higher, or are we... What happens if we don't get the level of funding? Like those spreadsheets you showed last week at TIC are pretty dire if we only get the midpoint 40% of funding, especially for public transport, walking and cycling.
I'm happy to jump in on that, and if Stacey wants to add anything. I've also got Hamish Bunn with online.
You're very, very quiet, Mark. I don't know.
Apologies.
Oh, yeah, got it. Yep.
Sorry, it might be the microphone. So just a reminder, so the government's draft GPS is out. They're looking to finalise that in the next month or so. The key bits, though, we sort of find out through two particular steps. First of all, NZTA will give us a view of our continuous program funding, ideally in early June, which sort of covers off our core renewals, maintenance and operations, but critically including our core public transport services. So that'll give us a good view around that. The approval of new project funding, we might not know until September. And critically, just to remind everyone, this is on a 3-year cycle, so it's on a different time horizon to the 10-year long-term plan. So, we've obviously, but jointly between Council and AT, put in a joint submission on the GPS. We've raised significant concerns around the level of funding in particularly the PT infrastructure class and the PT services areas. We yet to see the outcome of that and to what extent it's taken on board. We've also flagged issues around, for example, the lack of mention of climate, sustainability, etc. in the GPS. But I guess the way we're thinking about it is once we find out and go through those steps, we will need to see what level of co-funding is available. And it might require us to come back to council at certain points for any sort of additional conversations if we find that certain things aren't co-funded. And in practical terms, I would be suggesting that, for example, September might be a prudent time for us to come back once the dust is settled and we have a good view on the level of co-funding around to what extent some of those projects or programs, particularly in the capital space, are funded in the coming 12 months. So there's a lot of complexity around the co-funding piece and these interacting processes, but I don't believe there's anything in there today that stops you from endorsing the long-term plan as it's being prepared in the mayoral proposal.
Thank you. So it will be very transparent if the GPS comes back and it goes against our feedback, and we will have to either cut or somehow 100% fund PT infrastructure and walking and cycling infrastructure. That would be our choice.
Correct. Yes, the choice is ultimately with council. If the co-funding's not there, there's choices available. But we would be wanting to be working collaboratively with councillors on that.
Thank you. And the other one, the concerns we had around those cuts to bus services, Stacey. So just double checking the funding that the Mayor's put back after the community and our feedback will essentially ensure that, apart from those two quite outlier routes, all the other services, all those communities will still have the bus services they have, especially at peak.
Correct. It will be what I'll call a reduction in terms of timetable only for those particular routes. So we'll be doing that where, based on the insights, we'll take selective approach in terms of how we reduce that. But they will all have coverage. We will not fully withdraw any of those other services.
So the 70-odd thousand trips will be still largely in place. Thank you.
Correct.
Thanks, Mayor.
Councillor Williamson, please.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Just two or three sort of bits and pieces that I'm still not sure in my mind. The regional fuel tax has still got about 6 weeks to run. My understanding of it, it's about, is it right that it's about 12 million a month? So we've still got about 16 million coming in from the regional fuel tax to come. Can I just get that clear? Approximately that sort of sum of money.
I'm not sure on the exact number, but you're probably maybe 12 mil still to go.
Okay, and how much, is there 400 million still unspent in the kitty?
I haven't got the exact figures to hand, but it hasn't really changed from the previous forecast we've provided. And obviously there was that money was substantially earmarked towards Eastern Busway.
Okay, so can we just go back? How much is in the kitty right now? You don't have that number?
I don't have that fingers to hand.
Okay, because if that's the case and there's still another 16 to come, there's about 416 million. I'm keen to know, what is that going to be spent on?
It's per previous advice, principally Eastern Busway. As a reminder that the regional fuel tax was always getting collected in advance of getting spent, or invested I should say, and there was obviously, the government was quite prescriptive about where it could be spent going forward, but that's where the lion's share of it goes.
So it's all tagged for the Eastern Busway or mostly?
Mostly.
Oh, okay. The Kiwi Rail track access charging. I see in the paper I found, I've just made some notes here, that we were pushing it up from 45 up to 50, up to another 5 million, up to 50 million, right?
Correct, just to be really clear on Kiwi Rail track access.
Yet Kiwi Rail say that Auckland should be paying, I've got it, 89.7. That's what they're saying we should be paying as our access fee.
Correct. So if we were to receive co-funding on the additional 5 in the middle proposal, it would take our track access monies that we would pay Kiwi Rail in the coming 12 months to about 55 million versus a $90 million is the latest ask I saw from Kiwi Rail.
Do we owe any arrears on that payment? Because again, I try to get an answer to this. I understand over previous years we haven't paid the full sum that Kiwi Rail has asked for.
Every year there's been a negotiation and an agreed amount that we've paid. There's been discrepancies obviously over times of disagreement around the level of fundings required. The piece that we're still working through internally is to understand exactly what a 90 mil ask would be on, because when we start to compare it to things like the equivalent level of spend on our roading renewals program, it just seems very, very high. And trying to separate out and understand to what extent that's trying to play catch up on retrospective track work that arguably we've paid for previously.
I'm just trying to get a hold on how much money we may be in the gun for when it's resolved, both what the arrears from the past might come to and what the difference that we've come to is 50 to 89.7. It's $39.7 million. That's the difference.
In round numbers, it's about, well, depending on co-funding, yeah, there's potentially about a $30 to $40 million gap here between what we've just been asked for and what's set aside in the long term.
Because when we increase a budget like the public transport thing by 10 million, this could chew that up big time and more. Oh, that's ridiculous that they even think of it.
What we're clear on is just to be really clear, the long-term plan does not currently fund the delta between about, call it 55 mil and 90 million between what we've set aside versus what Kiwirala are now asking for. But the amounts Kiwirala are asking for are substantially higher than previous years. And we're still working through with them. And if I was to call out one key risk, and I'm not suggesting that councillors look to set aside this in there because we don't have a high degree of confidence around that 90 million number at the moment. It asks a broader question about, the tracks have not been in a great state for years. Who should be paying for that maintenance? And should it be passed straight on to us?
Okay, it's just that when I read numbers and I see there's a difference, I keep thinking, hell, are we in the gun for that, or just do we walk away and say, we're not paying that?
More of the latter, without any additional funding.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
Good searching questions. Councillor Ferry, please.
Thank you. And I just wanted to address something in the 14 billion capex, and glad to see that's up a bit and now includes the level crossings for Takanini. I just wanted to clarify, obviously there's a whole lot of other level crossing work that needs to happen that's not covered in this. What are we looking at as a mechanism for addressing that funding gap, please, outside the LTP? You seem to be on, Stacey, but maybe it's a... oh, there we go, it's a Hamish question.
I'll have a go at that one. Sorry, at the moment that mechanism is unresolved, and we think it's a conversation that's going to have to happen with central government because the numbers are extremely substantial and are beyond our program or the NZTA's program. So I think that's one of the things, for example, in forthcoming work on the Auckland Integrated Transport Plan that we would want to put on the table is an area that needs some additional funding work to resolve.
Great, thanks for confirming that. Thank you.
Councillor Lee, please.
I want to comment, if I could, on Councillor Williamson's line of questioning in regard to rail access charges. From my estimation, AT, and therefore we ourselves, have paid KiwiRail around about 600 million up until a couple of years ago for track access to the network. Now, if KiwiRail are demanding more money right now, I'd make the following point. The rail network hasn't been fit for purpose for quite a long time, and without pointing fingers, the responsible agency is KiwiRail, yet they are demanding the full rent as if it was a fit-for-purpose rail network, which it is not and hasn't been for many months now. In regard to the present upgrade work, that was funded by and track work that was funded by two discrete grants from the Minister of Transport in the last government, not from the money that Auckland ratepayers have been paying for a fit-for-purpose rail network. I don't know where that, and that money amounted to about 600 million when I last checked. I don't know where that money went, but it didn't go on maintaining properly the rail network. Now, if KiwiRail were renting out houses or renting out cars, not only would they not be able to charge that amount of money, but they'd be liable to be sued for not providing the service they're charging for. Just make that point. AT should actually take a hard line in any negotiation with KiwiRail and not a soft one. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, that wasn't exactly a question, but it was very interesting. Thank you very much.
No, it was a comment.
Yeah, I know. Well, I'm just about to move from questions into comments. So I've got one last question from Councillor Bartley. Then we will move into debate, which is comments. But Councillor Bartley, you have a question about AT. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to pick up on my local board's advocacy around Onehunga and the public transport services that, you know, they've had the cut from Onehunga to Britomart line. Now it just goes to Newmarket. A lot has shifted over to using the Penrose station, and then picking up the fact that it's not just locals that use PT in that area. You've got people coming over from Mangere Bridge using the Onehunga train station and now Penrose. So I wanted to pick up on their plea really for a grown-up conversation, and then also the questions around the removal of the residential delegation regarding Kiwi Rail through Onehunga, and then their requests, just about what is happening around transport for their particular area, given a lot was reliant on the light rail. So other communities would be in the same boat because they relied on that light rail to have alternate provision of public transport in their areas.
Thank you, Councillor. May I suggest that I pick this conversation up with you separately, and we can talk about what we are doing within the local area in terms of those networks.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I sense that we're ready to go into debate. So I'm just going to pause for a minute or two. Because I believe there's been a couple of very minor wordsmithing to the latest mayoral proposal. Max will just point these things out. We've changing
just
words
circulating hard
better
copies,
to reliable and things like that. So just run through those, please. They're just clarifying and improving and polishing, but they're not real changes, if I get. And they're going to be handed out to everybody. Thames and Max will do a lap. Just move down through them there, please, Sandra, without an hour. There's one of them. You can see that that's not big stuff. And I think the second part was just to divide that last one in two bits in case there was some overlapping. They're germane to those people who regard them as important, but they're not earth-shaking changes. Both myself and the seconder are okay with them, so they're pretty small, just polishing, as it were. Now, at some risk we'll head into the debate, and comments are now welcome.
Wayne, just in terms of seconding that, which I'm happy to do, can I just acknowledge Councillor Turner in terms of putting up that one that we can see on the screen up there. I'm pleased to be able to include that, Ken.
Yeah, I think it's something that quite a lot of us have a support for and belief in, and it's just insisted it's there, and that's why I'm very happy to have that minor amendment. Thank you for that. Okay. Councillor Fletcher.
Oh, is this debate?
Yeah, we're taking the dangerous steps into the murky water of debate.
Okay, can I take a call then on
Pardon?
debate? Yeah, okay. Your proposal today differs quite a bit to the original proposal that we looked at last year. I note that it's pepper-potted with a number of changes and concessions that I am assuming have come about because of negotiations that you've done with councillors to secure their votes. But it's really my hope today that for all of us sitting around the table, we're not looking at our own local areas, that we are looking regionally and in that helicopter view at the significant challenges that are facing the region. During the recent debate that we had over the GPS, I used the quotation from Voltaire that you liked, sir, perfect being the enemy of the good, meaning that insisting on absolute perfection has prevented us so often in the past from doing anything. And so for me today, I am really focusing on that. And that is the dilemma I have. What you are proposing is not perfect to me. It is not perfect in any way. But I want us to implement some good, given the massive challenges that are facing the region. The Mayor has learnt, colleagues, that he cannot buy my vote. I have never succumbed to having my vote bought and will not. I have what my mother calls my cut off my nose to spite my face syndrome well in place. But what the Mayor will learn today is that I can give my vote. And I am choosing to give my vote to this, even though this proposal is not perfect from my perspective. I think in light of all of the challenges, it's still going to be too high in terms of rates and challenges for many families. However, it is the best on offer, and it's about leadership. And while the Mayor, like me, is flawed and is not perfect, I think he has genuinely, after hours and hours and hours and days and days and days, he has actually tried to arrive on something with all the little concessions and everything else that is going to be palatable and he can get across the line. So, you know, I really want to make the point, this is not perfect. I am disappointed that we haven't taken as many opportunities as we could have with the Auckland Future Fund. But I am willing to give you my vote today because the region needs some leadership, and you are the best on offer at this time in offering that leadership. And believe me, I don't mean that rudely, but it's the best we have at this moment in time. So you do infuriate me on a regular basis, Mr. Mayor, as I am sure I infuriate you. But what you are at least offering us today is you are taking us away from the denial of previous councils and budget committees and finance committees and the hollow assertions that we had no financial crisis impending and all of the assurances that the financial situation of the council was entirely sustainable, which I knew was bullshit. And the chickens have come home to roost. So I think that today we are living with the consequences of some poor decisions that have been taken, and what you're offering us is a pathway through it. I think we can improve it, but we've got to do something today. So I have already said my great concern about Aucklanders who are really experiencing huge financial pressure with high interest rates, with high rates of inflation. And I think for many people, the fear of unemployment is pending. There is a decrease in real income for the majority of households. So what you are proposing is not perfect, but after the hundreds of hours of questions and answers and workshops, and I would suggest to you for the next time you do this, you actually open the workshops up to the public so we don't have to go through this repetitive theatre of all the issues. So I'm not going to raise all the issues that I raised during the workshops, and I don't feel particularly happy that 6.8 is the starting point. I think it will hurt households, but it's the best on offer, and you will have my support today, and I don't intend to repeat everything that I've already said in the multiple workshops, and I wish you well in garnering support.
Well, thank you, Councillor Fletcher. I'll be damned with faint praise, but that's okay. I'll accept that for what it is. I don't think it was ever expected that everybody would get exactly everything they wanted out of here. I'm, along with Councillor Williamson, rather in the do less and pay less quarter. Yep. But I accept that I am not fully representative of everybody. There are others who want to. So everything is something of a compromise. So I am both apologising and proud of my ability to compromise.
You're leading, and that's good.
Thank you. No, let's just put the hands up so we go straight to the vote now. Or is anybody really? Sorry, councillor Watson, thank you.
I'm just trying to clarify what the process is here. So we've got, you know, your recommendations. So are people getting the opportunity now just to speak to them as a whole, knowing that there's a whole lot of amendments that are going to be coming? When? Because we can't vote on this.
Well, we're opening for debate, and debate may produce amendments. But if they don't produce amendments, we won't debate amendments. But at the moment, there are nobody's actually moved the amendments.
You haven't received any?
Well, I think they've been said, but they have to be moved and seconded before they become amendments.
Yep.
So if they, so I've just opened the floor and we'll see what happens. But thank you for that point, Councillor Watson.
Point of order, Mr. Chair, Your Worship. Hello. I don't know. I understood that there was an amendment. I'm not the one who necessarily supporting it, but I understood that there was an amendment from Councillor Foley.
Yeah. Well,
and that would be
someone to move
on
an amendment.
First.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think I was advised that I can move my amendment when we get to the governing body meeting, and I intend to do it there rather than here at the committee.
You can. It's a different committee.
Yeah, I don't want to. It's fine. Thank you.
I'll just check with my advisors on that one.
That's it, Rob.
Point of order, can I just clarify the difference in membership between the Budget Committee and the governing body? Thank you. What is the difference in membership?
The difference in membership will stand up in the corner.
So, yeah, we're not on the... I mean, at the end of the day, it's two separate meetings, so I would have thought technically you're able to do what you like in the governing body meeting, but whatever happens in this meeting, we participate on it.
Righto. Well, so it doesn't appear as though there are any amendments. Okay, if there's no amendments, Councillor Filipaina.
Just a procedural question, Chair. In regards to some of the aspects and recommendations up there, I think, as always, and I'm hopefully going to get an affirmative, is that we will advise our two ladies of the ones we wish to vote against. That way, at least, it won't be division, everything else, which I'll most probably do at the GB. Kia ora.
Yeah, I think that's the correct way. I mean, otherwise we'll be here for weeks. So when we get to the substantive part, you can vote it, but you can actually say that I don't particularly like clause B or something or other. Okay, that seems to have been an accepted behaviour. Hang on a sec.
If there's no speaking list, I'll move the motion be put.
Righto, it appears as though Councillor Walker wants to say something. Good.
Just seek clarification, Mr. Mayor. There are
Your pardon, sorry, I was just...
Sure. There are a number of items here where I've got issues, and I want to be able to raise those issues and have them recorded. It's going to be easier for me to put that in writing if that works. You know, so I'm just wanting to make sure that that is the case. For example, 1C, the transport package, you know that I've got a concern about the $50 weekly public transport cap because it only applies to the inner harbour ferries and not the ferries like Gulf Harbour that are outside the inner harbour. I'm just giving you an example, and there'll be a few instances like this.
And we just need to be really clear on process here. So are you indicating, Councillor, that you intend to vote against one aspect of this and have it recorded?
I'm indicating that there'll be more than one aspect that I want to register my vote against, and I don't want to bog the meeting down.
Yep.
And I'm just suggesting that I could give you that in writing. it may well not upset the vote.
Look, the main thing, councillor, is that you record any particular item that you are in disagreement with Sonia and Sandra.
I think we've been clarified. Yes, you can do that. You can say that you don't like various clauses, and we will note that in the minutes so that it's recorded. Okay.
Point of clarification, sorry, this is very confusing. So if something passes the budget committee vote, then it will go to the governing body vote. But if something doesn't pass the budget committee vote, we have no ability to reconsider that at the governing body. Is that correct?
I think you're probably right, actually. There's always curveballs being biffed around in the sport. But at the moment, there is a substantive
Your Worship,
motion in front of you that we are debating.
No, I would have
And
Can I just
it has
provide-
yet to be amended.
Provides the budget committee.
can I just provide some clarity on that question from Councillor Theory? I don't think that's strictly right. So the governing body is ultimately can make the decision on the budget that it thinks fit, and the purpose of the budget committee is to make recommendations to the governing body. The reason why it was established was by the Mayor to enable the participation of the IMSB in the budget decisions of this committee. So it is fair to say that having the substantive debate at governing body, including amendments, and not at the governing body, is not consistent. And not at the budget committee. Sorry, is not consistent with the intent of establishing the budget committee. But it is fully within the rights of the governing body to do it that way.
Member Taipari, please.
Kia ora, Your Worship. So I said what I said a little moment ago based on the fact that what I understand technically is appropriate. However, it would be wrong for me not to say on behalf of myself and Mr Kake that you created this budget committee, which was actually all through the governing body last year, to do the purpose of being inclusive, and which included us. So it does appear by the approach that is being taken by default that we are being excluded. So it has to be said by us that we consider this inappropriate regarding about trying to be inclusive with our board and the role we play within council. So I'm not sure how that's going to change anything, Your Worship, but I do want to put on the record that it's inappropriate in our view.
I think we'll record that in the minutes. It does. It's an interesting approach to being taken here, but those that are taking it will live with the consequences. Councillor Philippine.
Chair, just a way of clarification based on what the Chair has just said of the independent haukura. Now, if there is an amendment, I think I know what the answer is, but I'll ask. If there is an amendment that is put at the budget committee and that amendment fails, it does not stop whoever puts the amendment through from doing it at the governing body. Can I, that I think I know what the answer is, but I'd like to get the answer from the ladies, our governance advisors.
Just an answer to your question, Councillor, you are correct. You can do it at either or either, both or one.
But just sorry, Sandra, clarification. If hypothetically I put an amendment up at the budget committee, that amendment is not approved and don't have the numbers, that doesn't negate me from putting it up again at the governing body. Just want to confirm that that is correct.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Okay, well, this we may as well rattle on, and we've got no amendments, so the substantive motion is there, and and it seems as if we're going to have some amendments to debate, you may as well get on with and vote on this one here and then move to the governing body. And that's where I'm going to stand, but I will take further comments and questions from Councillor Hills, please.
Well, I've never seen this happen before, where there is an attempt to not include Haukura, not include the Māori voice, the Independent Māori Statutory Board members, and I'm quite shocked to see that happen. For amendments to be put forward and said, well, we might lose with the 2 Māori members so we've just chuck it to the GB just in case. I'm really shocked to see that happen and be put forward. My comments, I'll speak to the substantive because I think that's what I will do. I think there is lots to be, it's been another hard budget, Mayor and councillors, staff, everyone. For the community especially, the community is hurting out there. We thankfully aren't seeing the massive rates rises that we're seeing across the country, but these will still be tough on the pockets of many. But what I would say, it still ensures we are investing in our city to the levels we should be. The water care change will ensure we are investing record numbers into water infrastructure, which we need to do. The Auckland Transport, a number of us fed back that we thought reducing down to 13.4 was a bit of a backward step, so it's been fantastic to see an increase in the capital there for AT, including a lot of public transport infrastructure. Once again, thank you, Mayor, for taking the feedback from many of us on the bus services. The proposed cuts, I think, were totally inappropriate, so several suburbs would have missed out on bus services and had them cut back when there are things on the table like congestion charging. We would have been taking away people's options. So I'm glad that we will be increasing our services through the Climate Action Targeted Rate, but also be keeping the services we currently have. A few things, great to have the port lease completely off the table. I think, it was great that we pivoted away from that when there was a realisation that the councillors and public weren't in favour of that, but we're actually heading to a direction where we have more oversight, more control, better relationship with workers and far greater revenues too, which I think is maybe a surprise to some, but I think is a really obvious direction we've been going with our better relationship with the port the last few years. On North Harbour Stadium, thank you for taking the advice of, the beginning, Councillor Darby and I and Anna Atkinson, to take the sale completely off the table before consultation, and then taking the advice of Anna, Alexis and others, and the Deputy Mayor to have a focused local group to look at the future of North Harbour Stadium, because it's an important asset to our community, but we know that there is a current lack of use there that we need to be doing something different. But I'm very much glad that we managed to get the sale off well before consultation. The fairer funding, thank you Julie Ferry and others, that there was a real concern of our local boards that they were going to lose significant funding. This package increases funding in the first 3 years by 84 million to local boards. 84 million, and no local boards have those massive cuts that were actually proposed, which, yes, some would say some could have handled it, but others could not, in my opinion, have closed and sold assets that fast to deal with that change. So what is really good is that our local boards won't have to deal with that. On climate, thank you for keeping the targeted rates and increasing them back to where they were. You kept to your word, and the rest of us obviously are supporting that through this budget, including the netta increase, which will help us on significant regional pest management plan and issues like Kalupa and Tumaitonga and others over time that we will try and support through funding those things. On cycling, I know that your words and also the GPS say some unkind things about cycling, but this is, and don't tell Councillor Williamson, but this is the largest budget for cycling in an LTP ever. But what I want to see is that rolling out, because AT has continuously, in my opinion, not rolled out those projects, and it is such a tiny 1 or 2% of our capital budget. There's a lot of noise about things like cycling and walking projects, but it's only 1 or 2% of our capital transport budget. I think that's basically it. We are working towards the biggest infrastructure program ever seen for this city. And on the future fund, the Auckland Airport shares should go into that fund. And that fund, I have no other way of creating $700 million additional fund to our city for the future. I know that is the estimates, but it's the same independent estimates we use for the port dividend and the airport dividends that we put into our long-term plan. So I think this is far more protected than our current assets are. It means that they're diversified, but it also means that we can use those hundreds of millions of dollars for services and also put back into it. Because right now we're relying on more car parking and more flights, and the issue that we saw in the airport last year is we had a massive issue with floods there because one asset can be affected by one storm. So largely, I think it's pretty good. It's not everything I wanted, but I think around this place, we are not a government, we are not an opposition. There's 23 of us around this table, and probably every party and every fringe party and every party sit here. So it's up to all of us to try and sit and work over those 65 workshops to try and build a budget that looks like what our communities have told us to do. And that is not easy. I'm sure Christopher Luxon has a hard time with 2 parties. We've got an issue with 23 plus all our local board members all having different ideas for the 1.7 million people who live here and expect us to do this. So thank you.
Very good speech. Thank you very much for that. Councillor Dalton.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to speak to the substantive too. I guess, first of all, thanks so much to all of the staff, Tam and Ross and team, that have just been working such long hours and answering so many questions. Really, really value the advice that you provide to us, and also opening the door to us to receiving contestable advice. I really welcome that we were able to do that. And thanks to the Mayor's office and to you, Your Worship. This has come a long way from where we started, where I was not very happy at all. And it has been a really good process to watch, mostly for me on the outside, but the ability to be able to ask questions of your office and your office to ask questions of me and not feel like I was being lobbied, like I am at the moment about the shares. Not feeling like I was being lobbied and not feeling like I had to have my vote bought. I've never felt that way, and I'm grateful for that I've been able to remain independent in my thinking, which is obviously not always aligned to everybody else. In terms of the rate, I thought that we might need to go for a much higher rate, and I was quite willing to do that, to go to a higher rate, but you've landed it in a comfortable place. I know you're not happy with it, and others would like it to be less. But I've always felt that we've held our rates way too low, and here we are. We're not resilient enough when we continue to hold rates down, because that is quite a popular thing to do. It is fiscally irresponsible, and it leads a city into a place where it cannot be resilient from shocks like COVID, from storms. So I'm glad that we're starting to right and steady the waka in the right direction. With regard to the airport shares, I voted against selling the airport shares last year because I didn't see that the future in paying down debt was by doing that. I really, really was opposed to that. If you'd come to me with the model that you're presenting now, which is transferring the airport shares to a future fund with the opportunity to divest, then you probably would have had my vote. Because from my perspective, those shares are intergenerational. The purpose of those shares from legacy councils was to create an intergenerational fund for future Aucklanders. And to do that, we must ensure that we do the right thing with them. And it's been fine. It's been okay that they've sat there as shares at Auckland Airport. We haven't been a very active shareholder, and not for many, many, many years. The opportunity to be able to move those shares and create a further investment by divestment into shares that are doing better than Auckland Airport, possibly, or moving the shares to the future fund and not divesting them and investing them into other assets. That's a choice. At the moment, those shares could be sold by a majority vote around this table. We saw that last year.
what we're proposing, or what you're proposing, is that those shares and all of the assets that go into the Auckland Future Fund are protected, not only by a 75% vote to release, but by that legislation, but also the trust and all of the parameters that go around that. I have confidence in that, I have faith in that, and I think that it's time that the city, this council, does make the shift that it needs to make for a very changing city, a growing city, and a city that has got a lot of things to contend with in the future. Great news on the port. I mean, that was really contentious, and watching how well the port has been doing. In many ways, you know, that first phase of the port under Roger and Jan was to regain mana, and they did that. They delivered on that, and that, as a result, is starting to deliver more profitability and will continue to do so. And I believe that they will reach the targets that they have said that they are going to reach. And this is a good outcome for Auckland, a good outcome for council, and a good outcome for the workers. So really appreciate the tripartite agreement between us and Roger, Jan and Grant from the Maritime Union. Fairer funding is just amazing. For Minerewa Local Board, who is the worst of the worst in terms of being funded well, $13 million over 3 years. I'm tempted to go back. $13 million over 3 years to invest in equity across the community that has been missing out for so long. Congratulations, Councillor Ferry, for shepherding that through. I wasn't on your committee, but I attended a number of your meetings, and you worked really hard to get those resolutions over the line and listen to everybody, and also end up with some pretty good recommendations going forward for the islands and others. So just great job, Your Worship, and look forward to seeing this all unfold over the next year, and I will leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Henderson, please.
Came to me a lot earlier when I was expecting. Yeah. Oh, I thought it was on. Oh, thank you. Goodness, awesome. Yeah, look, I'm pretty shocked and stunned about the I guess, tactics here, and I don't want to go into it, but I just want to say that I publicly disagree with what's happening here around the IMSB situation. I'll leave it there. But look, it's disappointing that it's affected my mood, because I'm actually feeling upbeat about a lot of the stuff here today. Look, I'll try and get back on track with the upbeatness, because look, it's not perfect. There's plenty of stuff that, you know, each of us individually would like to change around this stuff. I mean, for example, climate change, I still feel we haven't gotten the advice we need, although we've moved a bit closer with the extra public transport funding. I think we need to come back to that and keep pushing it. But look, let's talk about some of the good things, eh? We sorted the port. We bloody did it, right? And I want to thank everyone involved. The hard work behind the scenes of staff, of the mayor, of course, of the unions, of course, campaigners out there, submitters out there, that they made a difference to their city and they changed a policy that we were going to make. And that's fantastic. I love that. You know, a lot of councillors here worked behind the scenes as well to get that to cross the line. I want to thank you too. I think it's a good result. Honestly, fantastic. More dividends into the pockets of Auckland ratepayers. Most importantly, a safe, secure, guaranteed workplace for our workers that are working so hard for our city. So that's fantastic. Thanks for the making space for water money, the flood recovery money as well. Look, while we're sitting here debating this stuff, we got people that are still crashing on the couch tonight at their mate's place. I mean, flooded out. Still. Goodness. And this kind of funding goes directly toward helping meet the needs of these people, and I really, really applaud that. The sooner we can get there, the better on that. Look, I want to point out regarding the proposed rates increase that the flip side to that, you know, a cut in rates is a cut in services. That's where we're at right now. And people rely on their services more than ever in a cost of living crisis. You'll notice if you've got small kids or you're a user of libraries, parks like me a lot, you'll see huge increases in the parks and the playgrounds and community events, all that stuff. And part of it is because it's free, because people are doing it bloody tough. We can't continue to cut these services. We just can't. And this budget, guarantees services as much as we could possibly do. So I'm happy about that. Speaking of cost of living crisis, my favourite topic, but I have to get to it. The $50 per week cap on public transport fares. Look, this is going to directly affect the bottom line, kitchen table costs of suburban and rural Aucklanders. That's addressing their cost of living. From Zone 3, if you're a peak public transport commuter for work or study, you'll get $500 a year annually in your back pocket as a result of this proposal. I'm passionate about it because it's personal for the people of my ward and surely others. Look, we're still paying today, the 5th largest public transport fares in the world. That's just not acceptable, and we have addressed that, and I'm so proud of that. Around the Future Fund, I also want to point out that, look, we've been sitting here year after year after year, and we say, look, we need to raise non-rates revenue, we got no money, you know. This proposal will actually address that. It's deciding to do something about this problem ourselves. It's more money for services, it's more protection for our investment, and it's less risk. Consider the counterfactual, colleagues, where we keep the shares and we take a lower amount of dividends into the future. Not only is that less security, that's more risk to our capital, the simple fact is we are projected to get much less dividend for the city, which will mean less services. This is public money to spend on the things that people really need. Politics means we're not going to get support around this table for the kind of rates increase that's actually needed in this city. That's a fact too. We've had these debates every year. So there's no way around it. It would mean cuts to services. People talk to me about, what I campaigned on, all this stuff. Personally, I campaigned on one central thing, that I would protect public services from savage cuts. There are people out there that might not agree with the way I've gone or plan to go about this, but I'm fulfilling my promise to my residents that I made. Thank you, Councillor Walker, for interrupting. I'll interrupt you too next time. People need these free services, as I've said, parks, community facilities, libraries and ever. And to do this proposal, I believe, is a progressive proposal. It has progressive politics at its heart, actually. I'm happy to be accountable for my vote today. I welcome that. I hope that the progressive family out there actually listen to the benefits of the proposal and vote for those that really need the public services in this city. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Henderson. There's nothing else up here yet. Oh, Councillor Bartley wants to speak.
Okay, I'll have a go. Right. I want to address, I have been kind of mentioning my local board as well because I know I'm a regional councillor, but I don't want my local board to think that they've gone unheard, just like all our other local boards that presented to us. I'm lost on the people commenting about their votes, not for sale. I never feel like my vote is trying to be bought. In terms of the proposal, I want to support what council has been doing to try and get this out to our diverse communities, and I hope we continue to do that and put the effort in to reaching the different parts of our city that we know haven't taken part in community consultations, long-term plan, any submissions that come into council. So I applaud the staff for what they were doing in that regard, and the staff that turned up to the consultations late at night and the community groups that they contracted with to run our consultations, and also our advisory panels. So I want to make that point clear. In terms of transport, thank you for the increase that you proposed more than the central proposal, because that was strong from our communities that they wanted to see more in regards to transport. And I just want to add on, not just making public transport faster, more reliable and easier to use, but also safer in regards to what Councillor Dalton raised in previous meetings about women and transport design. I want to speak about the bus shields. Someone who's one of my best friends' father was a bus driver, and he was stabbed when he was driving the bus a few years ago. So I applaud you putting that in here. Thank you, because people have been crying out for that for a long, long time. The $50 cap is also good, given the affordability issues we're going to see once the congestion tax comes in as well. But making sure that the services are there for people to actually switch to. Thank you for the investment in homelessness. As we see, you know, so many people are affected by this, and it's not just about moving people on, as some groups are trying to lobby us to do. Good to see the housing and growth infrastructure. So many times people have said to us, you know, is there infrastructure to match all the growth that you're putting in the city? And, you know, you've got the efforts in here to make sure, at least with the Auckland Housing Program, that we do that. Thank you for the ports, because, you know, leasing the ports, you know, people didn't want to see the ports move out of public ownership, even if it's in regards to just leasing. Fairer funding, thank you for the work on that and your leadership there, Councillor Ferry, because it was very hard to stomach some of the budgets that would be removed from our local boards with high social deprivation. In regards to the good things as well, animal management, thank you for the investment in animal management, because our shelters are just unable to cope. And what the effect has been is not only on the staff and their well-being, but also on the adoptable dogs that we could adopt out, which we weren't able to do, as the shelters were too full with the dogs that were being picked up from roaming and attacks. In regards to safety, thank you for your proactiveness in regards to safety, and also to the police working with your office and council. Yeah, as we know, it's just Band-Aid fixes though, so long-term investment into community solutions would be ideal. Acknowledging Sport Auckland active and the Sport and Recreation Facilities Fund, their advocacy in that regard. Thank you for mentioning Waikaraka Park and its pivotal place in regards to Speedway regionally for the city. I am concerned about Mount Smart, because I don't want to see Mount Smart end up in the same boat as North Harbour Stadium. So appreciate the investment in keeping the essential costs going, I suppose. And then lastly, the airport shares. I can't support Roman numeral 2, because although I support a future fund, I don't support the shares being part of funding that. I don't have any fancy argument in regards to the finance of it, because we've been through it all before. Basically, you know, other parts of the city, other parts of the country still have a stake in the airport. Overseas still have stakes in the airport, like America, which I was confused to read about, because they're all about commercial and privatisation. And then I looked up this Journal of Air and Law and Commerce in 1934, which talks about why should a local authority still have airports? Why should it still have a stake in the airport? Why should municipalities build airports? That was the discussion back then. And it came down to public purpose. Does it still have a public purpose? I would argue that the airport serves a public purpose because it contributes to the regional economic growth of this city. It connects people domestically, internationally. We've seen $15 billion worth of freight passing through the airport each year through this city that we govern. 21 million passengers travelling through the terminals in our city that we govern. So, yeah, I would put that argument, it's not a strong argument, but, you know, I know that it's a hard task to try and convince people to save the shares, the airport shares. The majority were actually owned by Auckland City Council, 30% in 1988 in the report that I saw. But I acknowledge the efforts of our Manukau councillors that are trying to save what's left. And basically because, you know, I 11 local boards, but also there was some feedback that came through, not a majority, of people like myself, maybe it's naive, that still want to have a stake in the airport, in the gateway to the city. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Clearly you've read it all. Good girl. Councillor Filipina.
Thank you, Chair. I have forwarded an amendment, and that is the amendment for A. So if that could go up, please, ladies. And before that amendment comes up, I just want to invite everybody around here to get off the horse around, oh, that's a shame, the Independent Māori Statutory Board members are not on the governing body, and you should have put the amendment when they were part of this committee. Well, I spoke to our Matua David, and on his suggestion, it was going to go to the GB, but as a result of what he had said to us today, I have now chosen to put it through this committee. So please get off your fellows' horses, some of those that have already spoken, because I'm always the person that will talk to the people who are concerned and who is part of this committee. And so I'm now going to speak to the amendment. This amendment, sorry. The amendment up here, just to let everybody know, has gone through, went through Tamsin, and the delay in sending this amendment is because I wanted to make sure around the numbers, especially for the rates. That was one of the most important things, to make sure that the numbers are correct. And from what I've been told by Michael and Katie, and I want to say thank you, ladies and Michael, they are correct, which means that if we go through to the first part around the rates, first year, it's the same, 6.8. Second year, there is an increase, and that increase is 1.6. And in the third year, it is a decrease of 1.7. Now, my amendment is to say, and by way of replacement, is to do the work that we need to do in the 12 months. Chair, you've mentioned the 100-odd hours that we've gone in workshops. I've been to most of those. And what, from my perspective, and I asked this of Max, how long will it take for us to do the work that is needed to find out some of the other capital projects that we can put into this fund? I was told it'll be about a year, 12 months. That was at the workshop. Today's meeting, I asked yourself, Chair, and also the CEO, but you commented, and I said, wouldn't it be better if we did the work first? I'm supportive of the Future Fund. And this is only to say, let's do the work. Let's do the work around what we can put into the Future Fund. This is what it's all about. Just do the work for the next 12 months. Bring it back to us. As a result, we have a decrease in the third year of 1.7. So that's all I'm asking, is for everybody to have a look at it, done the work on it, and that's all it is. I support the Future Fund, but I think we need to do work on whether you end up putting in the ports dividend, you end up putting the sales of any land that we have. That's all I'm asking. Put it off, and in the third year, this is what happens. It'll be a decrease, and I have no doubt at all that the Future Fund will be established. And we had that with the Merrill proposal. The Merrill proposal was to establish it, but that was in the second year. My one is do the work. That's what I'm asking the CEO to do. And obviously, it'll be the Merrill office and the staff to do the work, come back to us in 12 months and say, this is what we believe can be put in there. At the moment, it's only conjecture. That's all we're doing so far. So that's all there is in regards to this amendment, is to say, look, come back to us in 12 months. If you scroll down, please, and C, in regard to that, that can be done. This is why it was suggested that C is not in there by our staff. And what happens from that perspective is that it'll be back. It'll be back next year after all the work's done. E is really to say what we all know. And that is, whether it be the Auckland International Airport Limited, the shares, it'll be subject to the governing body deciding to transfer the shares if the fund is established. We all know that. That's exactly what's been said. This is why the staff have said putting that recommendation is just explaining what everybody knows. So it's not about getting rid of the Auckland Future Fund. It's not about that. It's about our staff doing the work. So that's all I've got to say in regards to that. But ngā mihi kia horua, ngā mihi kia koe e te rangatira, David. I just, like I said, you know, I mean, I spoke to you first, and as a result was the first plan, but aroha mai, after what you've said just now, it's better for me to put it through because I never ever would want to exclude, as you know, since I've been here in October 2010. Ngā mihi kia koe tau katoa, kia ora.
Is there a second? Is there a seconder, Watson, is it? Are you seconding this?
Yes, I am, and I'm happy to speak to it now if you want, Mr. Mayor. Right. I think it was Samuel Johnson who referred to the triumph of hope over experience. He was, I think, referring to people getting married for a second time, but in this instance, he might well have been referring to Auckland Council and its track record of disposing of income-producing assets and the way it has valued those assets. And I think this is what Councillor Filipaina is quite rightly trying to provide some rigour about. Well, we're told in A of the agenda that the purpose of the fund, the Regional Wealth Fund, the Auckland Future Fund, the Diversified Assets Portfolio, it's named about 3 different things, but we're told that the purpose of the fund will to be protect the real value of council's intergenerational assets. I guess the first thing I'd say, it's probably a little late in the piece for nearly $1 billion worth of those assets because they went about 9 months ago. So that first swag hasn't had really much protection. And as referred to in an article in Newsroom earlier in the week, that 833 million windfall down to repay council's substantial debt has bounced really right back up again to about 12.3 billion. So I guess what we're trying to ensure to some degree here is some sort of oversight and some sort of value put on these assets, these income producing assets, and not just automatically default to the easiest one here, and that's the remaining airport shares. That's an easy, lazy thing to do, as John Crawford said when we voted on the airport shares in the first time. And I guess the thing that's uppermost in my mind in supporting this is the experience of the diversified assets portfolio, which essentially this is just a few years ago. It was a solid one, a successful income producing fund, and it got sold off, and it got sold off very, very quickly. So the public are well aware of the council's track record of saying one thing and doing the opposite. So in this instance, I think there's a real need for us to have some certainty over what goes into this fund. So I think people can see the value of such a fund in terms of producing better return and dividends. But I think honestly, to be in terms of trust with the community, there might well need to be a period of showing that that they aren't going to backtrack on assurances that are given, that we maybe start with the dividends. We sold down $833 million worth of airport shares. If the return on the investment in the super fund is bigger than the cost of debt, then a case could be made for reinstating those airport shares via investment in this fund. That was what was said back at the time. So we haven't heard that. We haven't looked at some of the other sources of income that could go into this fund. So that's something that we should do, particularly, as I said, in light of the experience with the diversified assets, which we're essentially looking to reproduce here. As far as protection goes, Auckland Council Investments at the time seemed a very secure and appropriately structured entity. If you remember back to that time, that didn't save them too much. So this has been a little rushed. It zeroed in on the airport shares and bred the suspicion that this is just a ruse to get rid of the remainder. That may or may not be the case. Certainly from my view, I was very impressed with the returns, particularly the capital returns and the dividend returns from the airport. So it might well be that there's another model here in light of the experience just recently of the 833 million. It's gone. It's not going to be producing any income via returns. So I think it's contingent on us here to do a bit more diligence to look at what might otherwise just revolve around the easy sale of the remaining shares and sold quickly. We're told it had to do quickly. That might not be the optimum time to sell those shares, if what we're getting told is correct. So I think all this does is provide for that opportunity to provide a little bit of security to a public who've been watching on valuable income assets being, hocked off at every turn over the last decade, and to show a little bit of rigour and put a little bit of value on those assets. And I think that's something that's to be commended. It doesn't negate the attractiveness of this fund. It just makes us think a little bit more deeply as to what might go in it, rather than just deferring to the easy, sell them off as quickly as we can, and they go, and are they protected or aren't they not? Because they were meant to be protected in the ACIL, and that didn't end up too great.
Thank you for that. We've got some questions on the amendment. Councillor Deputy Mayor Simpson.
Your Worship, can I please ask Finance to come forward? I just need to get my...
Yeah, you can ask staff of advice
Sorry,
here, please.
sorry, Councillor, because I just want to make sure I really understand what you're trying to do here, both. Questions for the amendment?
No, we are having questions to the amendment. That's the normal process we go through. You should know that by now. You've been here for years.
Your Worship, if I just may refer councillors to Standing Order 1.2.8, which says that during a debate, members can ask staff questions about matters being discussed. Questions must be asked through the chairperson and are at his or her discretion. So the chairperson of the meeting has exercised his discretion to enable questions to be asked about the amendment.
Mr. Mayor, with all due respect, it's good to have legal advice and grant us legal advice, but it's important to also note that the person giving the advice should not be a political appointee of the Mayor's office. With all due respect, it needs to come from a public servant. And so, thank you, Max, but actually it's not appropriate for you to intervene in this debate. Thank you.
Questions, Councillor Simpson of the Finance Group, please.
So thank you, Your Worship. Because I value the Councillor's amendment, and I just want to get my head around it. So my first question is, does this assume that the airport shares will be sold in the fund?
Yes, the calculations of rates increases assume that the airport share, the creation of the future fund and the transfer of airport shares into that fund, but 1 year later than is assumed within the mayoral proposal.
Okay, and is it really a decrease in year 3? Because I thought rate increases were cumulative.
So you're correct, the rates increases are cumulative, rates increase cumulatively, whilst the increase shown there in year 3 is lower than is in the Mayor's proposal. The increase in year 2 is higher. So by year 3, a ratepayer would be paying the same amount. In year 1, they would pay the same amount. Under this proposal, they would pay more in year 2. So over the 3 years, you would pay more because you would get that benefit later. But so you're correct. It's a cumulative impact. So the increase in year the lower increase in year 3 is offset by the higher increase in year 2.
And just to clarify, I think, Michael, number 2 is the relevant one in regards to what Michael's just said. Sorry, not number 2. If you scroll down, around the decision around the shares, whether they go in the future fund, and that is at the governing body level. I mean, I know the consultation document because, as I put with the staff, the long-term plan 2434 will provide the Transport Council's shareholding in the Auckland National Airport Limited subject to the governing body deciding to transfer the shares if the fund is established. And that is the advice that I got from our staff.
So just to clarify this then, in order to get that last thing, you have to sell the shares. So if at the end of all this supposed extra work, which hasn't yet to be defined, if we don't sell, decide not to do it, then rates will go up more than what you've got in your thing. So you are actually putting up an amendment which assumes that it does get sold. So you're only delaying this. You're not actually putting up one that, because you've actually said subject to us deciding to. If they decide not to, then you won't get your 6.3 in year 3, you'll get a lot more. So it's not quite honest.
So I go back to what I said earlier, Chair, and that is after consulting with Michael and with Katie, this is the best. That is, and so all I'm really saying is that if we end up just doing the work first as I asked, so I mean, Michael, that's what I was given, and I mean...
But if you don't sell it as a result, you will get a lot worse than 6.3 in the 3rd year.
And that decision...
Those numbers, you have to understand this, they are assuming we make a decision. If you put it off for another year and you guys manage to avoid it being sold again for the same reasons we've just heard from Mr Watson, there won't be 6.2 in the 3rd year, it'll be considerably more. So I just want people to understand that. This is sleight of hand stuff.
So I think that's why I mentioned E. If you have a look at E, I hope you understand what he's saying.
Absolutely understand the E. If at E we decide, the governing body decided not to, then you go back up to the top and your 6.2 in the year 3 is gone. It'll be considerably more. You need to understand that.
Okay, I understand. So that's simple.
So people need to understand, if you don't do these things, kick the can down the road like we've done forever, costs will go up and ratepayers will pay more.
So
that's
just
what
the
you've all
point
got to understand
kick
here.
the can down the road, I want to say again, and this was you in regards to your answer when I said to you, isn't it better we do the work first about, let me finish before you interrupt, please, Chair. What I asked was, isn't it better to do the work first before we end up at least deciding and establishing an AFF, Auckland Future Fund? Your answer was, yes, this amendment is exactly in response to your yes. So I'm just going to leave it at that. You and I can debate it afterwards if you wish, but I'm just saying that, yes, let's do the work.
Perhaps you might explain what is the work, because as far as I'm concerned, we have had 120 hours. I've heard those questions from the same people dozens of times, trying to get a different answer to the same question. The work has been done. We have had advice. The work is quite simple, is that if we do this, we will save ratepayers money. If we don't do it, it will cost ratepayers money. That is the work. That's quite clear. You can't manufacture a saving without doing something to manufacture a saving. So what is this work? What is the work that you failed to identify in the 120 hours of meetings we've had? I want to know, what is this work? Because as far as I'm concerned, we've done so much work about this that it's completely obvious to people what the results are. But for those who don't want to hear the answer, it hasn't been done, I suppose.
I'm going to wait till you finish. Have you finished, Chair? Yeah, okay. The work is the question I asked of the CEO. And there were some names and utilities that were named at the workshop. The CEO did not want to divulge those names. I am not going to divulge them in open as well. That is the work. Also, there was the port dividends that was discussed. Can they go into it? We discussed that at the last workshop. I asked about those. There was also some sale of some properties that maybe eke pānuku. Nobody's done the work on whether that can be put into the fund. I'm asking, that is the work that you have been talking about, but nobody has come back to say, yes, we have completed this work, because it hasn't been completed, because nothing was mentioned out of all the workshops we have had in regards to this. And I was part of the working group, as you know. So no work has been done. I can clarify that. If the CEO wishes to clarify what work have we done on the properties that get sold and the monies for that, what about the work on the port dividends? Have we completed work on whether they can go into the fund? I don't know. I haven't seen it, even in the 100 hours that you're speaking about.
Okay, well, we're wandering into debate here before we finish questions here, which is probably wrong, but just let me clarify that.
So I'd like to hear from the CEO.
Councillor, the reality is that we would have more work to do for any opportunities beyond the airport shareholding to go in there. That's all. That was already referenced in the substantive motion and discussed earlier, so really happy to do that. I'll just make one point while I've got the floor. When we're talking about asset sales, please do not forget that you've got a $300 million target for asset sales already baked in there and accounted for in the baseline budget.
Okay, I've got some more questions. Sorry about that. Councillor Tawapari has questions.
I haven't been elected, but so I appreciate the compliment though, but I haven't got questions. I'd just like to speak to it. So happy to wait.
Okay, well, I'll go through the questions and then I'll put you aside for you preserving your right to comment in the debate. Councillor Ferry, do you have a question?
Yeah, I do, and I'm just trying to understand the maths on this. So, and this is, sorry, Michael. What would the rates increase need to be in year 3? So that's the one that at the moment says 6.2. If the result of this is that we didn't put the airport shares into the future fund.
That would be 7.7.
Right. So the figures that we have there all rely on us still doing the future fund, still putting the airport shares in, just waiting a year.
So it assumes everything in the Mayor's proposal, but that the airport shares would transfer into the fund partway through the second financial year of the LTP rather than the first. That the benefit of that in that year would mostly go to creating the fix and finish fund of $20 million, and then the rates reduction. Yeah, there's a minor rates reduction in year 2 there from 7.5 down to 7.4, and then the bigger reduction is in the following year because you're getting the full benefit of the future fund. So compared with not doing the future fund at all, that is the same in year 1. It's 0.1% lower in year 2 and 1.5% lower in year 3.
So what about the outer years? So beyond the first 3 years, because this is the thing, like this amendment, I'm choosing my words very carefully here, or trying to, maybe failing. If this amendment just means we delay a year, then it kind of doesn't mean much.
So for the outer years, you're back at the same. Even for year 3, the amount of rates collected in year 3 is the same as it is under the Mayor's proposal. It's in year 2 where more rates are required because you're not getting the benefit of the future fund in that year.
Okay. Yeah. I'm aware that's election year, Desley. And I guess my question then is a rhetorical one to my colleagues about whether they are happy to go in to next year set up for a higher rates increase. But anyway, the other question I have then is we did address in the in the workshops and in discussion the idea of potentially putting the port dividends in down the line. Can you just remind us of what the advice was on the difference in returns on that in the first few years, that the difference between having the dividends come directly to us as opposed to putting the dividends into the fund? My recollection is that there was quite a significant financial difference.
Yes, the difference was about $100 million a year, so close to 4% rates increase would be required if those dividends went into the fund rather than being used to fund council services.
So if we put so say year 2 there, that's the 7.4% one. If at that point we also put the port dividends in, we need to add another 4% to that, is that correct? So that's 11.4%.
Yes, that's correct.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Philly? Oh, Lotu Fuli, Mama.
Kia ora, thank you. That was going to be my question, is what is the difference in year 3 if the shares don't go in? So it goes from 6.2 to 7.7 in year 3, so not a substantial hike. What is that difference in dollar amounts, in real dollar amounts per week, per average household? It just helps those who are listening in our communities to put that into real figures. Andrew Duncan is there at the back. It's about $2 a week, I think, difference, right? Per week. Now he'll correct me. For the average household.
Mike, please.
Per week.
Off the top of my head, possibly $50 a year and therefore $1 a week. Rough order of magnitude. So 1.5% to 2%-ish, as Michael said, would probably translate into that order of magnitude.
Got it, thank you. I thought it was $2, so even better than that. Awesome, thank you. So not a substantial hike if the shares are not sold. And I think that's what I'm talking about, is the language being used here. The difference is less than $2 a week. It's about $1 a week. Kia ora. Thank you, Your Worship. I'll reserve my right to speak later. That was just my questions. Kia ora. Thank you, Your Worship.
Any more questions? Otherwise, I've got 2 people that want to make a comment. Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Member Taipari wishes to make a comment.
Kia ora, Your Worship. I'll just give a little bit of context and to support Alf in the sense of prior to lunch, at the lunch break, we spoke about a proposed amendment. I didn't see the words, but the intent was, as the words are shown up on the screen, and I advised that we would be voting against that. And I am speaking against the amendment on the basis that we've done a lot of work. Our team's done a lot of work with council staff. We've participated in a lot of workshops, whether it be online or in person. We've had these questions, a lot of questions asked about a lot of things. We are supportive of the fund. We think it's an innovative approach. I've been here 14 years now, and I kind of found the council just continues to plod on. And I've seen you campaigned on change, and these are change mechanisms, right? And of course, nothing's perfect at the outset, right? You're always going to continue to refine things, but doing nothing isn't changing anything, okay? So we believe that, you know, I mean, talk to people around the country, the rate rises that people are faced with is outrageous. And for you to be able to propose this kind of rate increase with other strategic manoeuvres or options to consider as a package, and that's why any kind of breakdown of the package to me is a big issue. So, you know, we will be supporting the substantive, right? And this amendment, to me, doesn't, you know, contradicts that. And the way, and I get it, that we always want to have the best information, and I've been with Councillor Simpson on the quality advice program for a number of years, and it's all about getting the best advice. I'm not opposing that, but sitting and waiting isn't the answer. Okay, so I'll put it to you that way. My comments around what I said was, even though I knew what Alf was doing, I said to him, well, it's got to go to the governing body anyway, where you'll make your final decision on your plan and any amendments. What I didn't expect, because I knew there were other amendments, was that it would start a chain of behaviour. And that's why I said the statement that I said out, right? Wasn't directed at you only. It was directed at this council that that's not a good behaviour if other people are picking up the idea of not doing it at this committee. And I'll watch the governing body, probably online, but if I see other amendments, Your Worship, my case will be there. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Member Taipari. Councillor Newman wishes to make a comment, please.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Filipina, Councillor Stewart and I think we're a short time in the Manukau City Council. Remember, we borrowed more funding. We went and borrowed money to buy shares in Auckland Airport to achieve an outcome for which I don't think it was worth it. Actually, I do not think it was worth it. I have seen dividends taken to hold down rate increases in election year. I've seen that game played before. Seen it before. It happens. There is nothing to protect a raid on Auckland International Airport shares if you hold it now, and you think you're going to hold it now, so, you know, that's fine. I suspect in a couple of years' time they'd be sold. I think we should have moved on the shares to a great extent last year, actually. I think we got a better deal. But anyway, I can't support the amendment, Alf, because fundamentally I'm really unclear as to what is the intended outcome. Is the intended outcome more information to make an informed judgment, or is the intended outcome to actually stop the sale of the Auckland Airport shares? Now, I guess we'll all have our own view on that, but I really support us moving ahead with passing a balanced budget today. I support the Auckland Future Fund. If I have a qualm about the Auckland Future Fund, Your Worship, it's that I would like to have seen port dividends mandated to go into the Auckland Future Fund right now. But, you know, that's not on the agenda today. I hope that it will be, and it doesn't, you know, we can do more work around that, but I actually want to see this underway. And I do have a concern about the spiralling impact of rate increases, which I think is potentially on the cards here if we don't move on this. So I would hope that the substantive recommendations are adopted, and that I respect the amendment, but if the intention is actually about fundamentally trying to retain a shareholding, then I think that should be declared, and we should just have an up and down vote on that. But I guess the mover of the amendment will put me to rights if I'm wrong about that, but I won't be supporting this amendment. Thank you.
Very please.
Thank you. I've really grappled with the way forward on the key issue here, which I think, although it's come to a head through this amendment, is really the transfer, swap, highly likely sale of the airport shares. And so this is something I've spent a lot of time thinking about. I spent a lot of time thinking about it last year too. And in my private life, there's been some issues around airport shares that some of you may be familiar with too. So really been my year for airport shares, or indeed selling airport shares. Earlier in the year, I was very sceptical about the Future Fund proposal. When it first came out, I very much felt that it was a justification for leasing the port. and I was worried it would not be invested ethically, that any fund would not have the level of protection and security it required, could be easily undone by a future governing body. I asked a lot of questions about those aspects, the difference in returns for the future fund versus existing dividends, putting the dividends into the fund, that kind of stuff, and you saw me ask another question about that just before. And I absolutely could not have supported the future fund if it continued to require the port lease, which I think was and would still be a really bad idea for workers, for the environment and for the city. I'm really glad that's off the table. I acknowledge the leadership shown on that, and not least by many of my colleagues here, but also the Maritime Union and Roger Gray as the Port CEO. In the last month, the questions that I had around the Future Fund have pretty much been answered and addressed, which I have to say was a significant surprise. And I want to thank staff for their expertise and time. They've done a lot of work with us. You've heard about the number of hours and the number of meetings and stuff like that. That's, you know, that's a big deal, and I want to thank them sincerely for that. And I want to thank my colleagues for the way we've really tested that out as well, and really sort of tried to pull it apart in any way we can. And I'm feeling confident now that it's in pretty robust shape for both ethical investment and that protection that means that it will become a really useful intergenerational asset. The other surprise for me was discovering that through the Future Fund, we'll effectively be able to get around, depends on the year, around a 2% rates increase in income without increasing the rates by 2%, most years above what we'd get from the airport dividend alone. And it's no secret at this table that I tend to think that rates have been artificially low in Auckland for a long time, and that's resulted in underinvestment and put us in the OPEX hole we're in now. It's also no secret or surprise that there isn't a majority around this table for the kinds of rates increases that we need to close those gaps in renewals and climate action and in many other places. So the idea of a future fund that helps us to move towards one of my goals in coming here, which was to get council's income on a more sustainable footing, the idea of a future fund that does that is very attractive and hard for me to walk away from. So that leads, though, in turn, to the question of how to fund the future fund, because without a fund, it's just a future, and I'm not sure how we do that. So months of discussion around this, and mindful of our discussion last year as well about using assets, in that case airport shares, to pay down debt. So culminating from all of that, we have not had any other assets seriously put up. Nothing non-service, for sure, and nothing with the kind of implications financially, positive implications financially that this would have. So I'm sceptical that taking more time to find more, I feel like we've scraped the bottom of the barrel on that, and there isn't actually some magical way forward on this that we will find in the next 12 months, even the next 2 or 3 months. I feel like this is it. So in addressing this, I've been very mindful that I was elected on a City Vision policy platform, which has included a specific provision on the ownership of the airport shares for many, many years. That policy platform, which I imagine you're not all familiar with the detail of, it's cool, has 14 headings. Most of those have many bullet points underneath. And when it was refreshed in 2022, we do that before every election, the policy all hung together, the whole policy. But things have changed. And I have worked that through with City Vision. I've had a lot of conversations over the last few weeks through a lot of different formats. And I have support from my City Vision crew for the approach that I'm going to take today. I was also elected by local people who, in their feedback in my area, were in favour of the Future Fund and putting the airport shares in at a point where we still had a lot of unanswered questions. Both of my home local boards voted unanimously for this way forward across the political split between City Vision and CNR, who usually don't agree, and the regional feedback was also majority in favour. Other factors I've considered, the silent shareholder that council has been, the lack of influence that we have, and there have been no proposals to change that to a point where we did have any influence. The long shadow of privatisations from the 80s and 90s, the scars that have left on my fellow political travellers, the symbolism of the airport shares being owned, not least to ETU, the union I'm a member of. The climate impacts of an airport, we're making a lot of money there off car parking, and that's actually a problem in terms of emissions. And I want to acknowledge the strong wish from my colleagues and residents in the former Manukau city. I attended the Pacifica Whanau in Otara, and I heard firsthand what those shares mean to that community. I'm mindful that when you live on a Pacific island, the airport is your link home, and I do take that on board. At the end of the day, though, when circumstances change, I've changed my mind on this from the past position, and I will be supporting the establishment of the Future Fund, supporting shifting the airport shares so that we can have more good stuff for Aucklanders for the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hills.
Thank you. And it was just briefly on the amendment. This amendment does do what we're already doing. It is contingent on the airport shares going in. It just moves a whole year later, which not only will lose us the 20 million this year that we want to use for a reserve fund to fix community assets in Manukau and Auckland, it will also lose us the 70 million in the second year. That is not just the 40 million to offset rates, also the 20 to 30 million that we would put back into the fund. So this is a $90-ish million decision to do the same thing. And as Councillor Ferry said, in many workshops last year and earlier on this year, we asked quite a lot around what other assets could go in, and no one put other assets up. Golf courses were discussed. It went back and forward between they are local board assets with long leases, and my personal view is those should be used as things for making space for water if we were going to change them from golf courses. Those green spaces are important to me. Things like our building that we work in went up as a decision, but largely it was put back to us that the cost of renting and the use of that building would end up costing us more than selling it, so it didn't make a lot of sense. So a number of things were put forward, but nothing went into the consultation document, and so I don't want to sit here for another year having the same conversation where no one puts up another deal. So all this does is delay, loses us $90 million, and doesn't change what we already decided this time last year or late last year. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. We've now had 3 consecutive speakers against the amendment. Are there any further speakers for the amendment? Or otherwise I'll put it.
Division.
I didn't hear any.
Just saying when you're ready to put the vote, it'll be division.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Thank you, Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I fully support the amendment from Councillor Filipina because it is completely in accord with our requirements. I think obligations is what the word the Act uses in regard to decision making. And of course, people will remember the evening they were sworn in the town hall that they solemnly swore to uphold the Local Government Act and the Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act and any other act. And so we have to take that seriously, and I'm afraid its decision-making requirements or obligations are honoured, I'm afraid, a little bit more in the breach than actually what the Act requires of us. So in terms of Councillor Filipina's amendment, and people may, and I hear this pushback about the rates, what the rates, there is a crystal ball somewhere that can predict exactly what the rates will be, not only in the coming year, but next year and the year after exactly. And if Councillor Filipina's amendment means a departure from that, that's a serious concern. Well, it's not. It's not. What is important here is our obligations under Section 77. A local authority must, in the course of the decision-making process, seek to identify all reasonably practicable options for the achievement of the objectives of a decision and B, assess the options in terms of their advantages and disadvantages. I haven't seen much of that at all in the dozens and dozens of meetings, mostly behind closed doors leading up to this particular meeting. And going on to section 79, it is the responsibility of a local authority to make in its discretion judgments about how to achieve compliance. Compliance is the word of 77 and 78, and about in particular the extent to which different options are to be identified and assessed, and the degree to which benefits and costs are to be quantified, and the extent and detail of the information to be considered, and the extent and nature of any written record to be kept of the matter, and so on. Councillor Filipaina is trying to achieve the decision-making that Parliament required the local government sector to undertake, especially when it comes to significant assets and indeed strategic assets. So I make that point. In regard to what Councillor Filipaina's amendment might mean, the crystal ball department of the council, I recall we went out to the public with a projected rates increase of 7.5%. This is only a few months ago, 7.5% this year, 3.5% next year during the election year, and 8% the year after. And so, of course, these figures will have to change. And what happens today, there will still be tweaking of figures for even this year. So the arguments about what will happen in year 3, this is a 10-year plan. This is a $110 billion long-term plan we're talking about here. And the issues that Councillor Filipaina raises are absolutely fundamental to the integrity of this council's reputation when it comes to decision making. I fully support it, and I will foreshadow while we're in the budget committee that I will be seeking to strengthen the provisions of the promises that have been made by the Mayor and others, that we will be seeking the support of Parliament for any to protect the public interest when it comes to a possible future fund. Thank you.
Okay, anyone want to speak to it? Your Councillor Fuli will speak for it and then we'll go to it.
Kia ora. Thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief. First of all, I just wanted to say that the reason why I didn't move my amendment here was because this morning when I asked where should I move my amendment, I asked for advice, I was told I had to move it here. And that's when I foreshadowed during the conversation earlier on, I was going to move it here. But then I was advised after that actually I can move it at the governing body, which one would I like to do? And that was before Councillor Filipaina had the conversation with Matua Taipari. So that's when I decided, okay, I'll move it at the governing body because that suits me better. I'm just going to speak to this amendment though, and I am speaking in support of it, but I, of course, would like to go further than that. I would prefer to actually just nix the whole idea of the Auckland Future Fund for many reasons that others have shared as well. But I will support this because, like Councillor Lee and others have said, and like Councillor Filipaina have said, it is incumbent on us to do our due diligence. And we shouldn't look at a delay of a year or 2 years or 3 years as being something that is too much of a chore for us to do when we're talking about such an important strategic asset. And so I'll be supporting this. You know, I don't really want to, but I'll support it for those reasons. But like I said, I'd prefer to go further than that. And I'm just foreshadowing as well that I will be moving my other amendment during the next meeting. Kia ora. Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay, thanks very much. Well, Councillor Filipaina's called for a division on this, so we'll put it by division. Thank you very much. This is the amendment, not the substantive issue. Okay. This is to support an amendment from the original to what it is now. So, okay, you're voting for the amendment or against the amendment. That's not the whole thing. Okay? I'll call on Ms. Tomovska to do this.
Okay, councillors, you're voting on item 9, long-term plan 2024-2034 mayoral proposal, Councillor Filipaina's amendment. Amendment. Councillor Baker?
Against.
Councillor Bartley,
For.
Councillor Dalton,
Against.
Councillor Darby,
Against.
Councillor Ferry,
Against.
Councillor Filipino,
Aye.
Councillor Fletcher,
No.
Councillor Foley,
For.
Councillor Henderson,
No.
Councillor Hills,
No, thank you.
Member Kake,
Against.
Councillor Lee,
Aye.
Councillor Leone,
For.
Councillor Newman,
No.
Councillor Sayers,
Against.
Deputy Mayor Simpson,
Against.
Councillor Stewart,
No.
Chair Taipari,
No.
Councillor Turner,
Against.
Councillor Walker. Apologies, didn't hear that. Thank you. Councillor Watson. Councillor Williamson.
Against.
And Mayor Brown.
Against.
The amendment is lost. 6 to 17.
Okay. I think we'll all just stand up and have a minute of rest before we carry on.
Sorry, do you want to vote on the substantive now?
Oh, I think I can. I'd like to vote on the substantive now, if that's okay with everybody. Okay.
Sorry, you said we were taking a break and
You
we
now
have a
go
member
back,
who's
yeah.
just left the room.
Hey?
You said we were taking a break, a member just left the room.
Yeah, right.
So-
Well, yeah, I didn't want to trick somebody to leave the room, so we'll have a 5-minute break and then we will vote for the substantive one.
I wish to
Thank you.
speak to the substantive because you can't shut it.